Dead birds circle me, warm to the touch, smelling of wet earth and ozone. Their feathers brush my neck like cold, damp silk, each one pulsing with a faint internal heat. I drop the breathing doll. Silk stitching tearing, as my reflection in the classroom window screams without sound. The glass shows my own mouth, stretched impossibly wide, the jawline cracking like old porcelain, but no sound escapes. Only the frantic hammering of my own heart, loud in the unnatural silence. My pocket tweebed burns, where I shoved the glass eye param 13, it tweebling C, when my hand slips from the pocket S-edge, a tiny deliberate click against my thigh. The air thickens like wet paper. Param 14, pressing my lungs flat against my ribs. I gasp, but the air feels thick, resistant, like trying to breathe through a submerged mattress. The classroom walls, once a sterile beige, now seem to ripple with a faint cyan static. Param 15, casting shifting, sickly light on the desks. I stumble backward, my heel catching on a loose floorboard, and the room tilts. Desks shift. Hair patches, tine growing on their surfaces. Param 4, not tufts, but dense, coarse mats of dark hair, like fossilized skin sprouting from the wood grain. Each patch seems to focus, with a slow, wet rhythm, drawing my eye like a sickening heartbeat. The muffled crying wet, paper sue from the vents, Param 16, a sound like tissue soaked in rain, dragging through the vents. It's not a child, sob. It's the sound of something tween unfolding inside wet cardboard. My skin prickles with cold sweat. Param 18, the panic turning to a deep, icy dread. I need to move. Now, asterisk, I lurch toward the exit, the door a rectangle of bleached white in the flickering cyan light. But the stitched messenger blocks the threshold. It sits on the only exit, a cat woven from shadow and thread, its fur a patchwork of mismatched black and grey. Its teeth are polished gold and jagged bone, Param 6. But I don't see gold, just the sharp river, worn gleam of old teeth, like broken shells. It licks a scar on its paw, Param 25, a long deliberate stroke, the pink tongue rasping over a raw, hairless patch. Its eyes, figlant, in the neon static, Param 15, not green or yellow, but a deep, unsettling magenta, reflecting the flickering lights. The air hums with the radio tuning static. Param 22, a low thrum beneath the wet squelch of my own feet dragging through unseen sludge on the floor. I can't move. My legs feel like lead, the wet paper air pressing down harder. The reflection, some mouth in the window is still open, wider than my own, the edges of its lips tippling back from teeth that aren't mine. It's not screaming, it's waiting to be fed. Asterisk, the realization hits like a physical blow. The birds circle closer, their warmth intensifying, smelling of damp soil and ozone. The hair on the desks grows faster, strands snaking across the tabletops, reaching for my ankles. The muffled crying from the vents is louder now, a wet, guttural, shushing sound. The cat's magenta eyes hold mine, unblinking. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. Its presence is the door. The price now. My throat is dry, my mouth tasting of copper and wet earth. The glass eye in my pocket, foot blinks you again, a tiny cold pulse against my hip. The reflection, some mouth opens wider, the jaw unhinging further, revealing a darkness beneath. The birds land on the desk beside me, their feathers damp and heavy, their beady eyes black and unblinking. The air presses harder, the wet paper sensation making my chest ache. I feel the weight of the fossilized watchers, Param 8, in the walls, their silent fossilized eyes fixed on my back. The cat licks its scarred paw again, a slow, deliberate motion. Its magenta eyes fix on my pocket. Woofy, the price. Now, asterisk the birds. Warmth is unbearable. The ozone smells sharp in my nostrils. The reflection, us mouth is a cavern. I can breathe. The air is wet paper. The cat waits. The price now. My left thumb feels like it has been dipped in ice water, then plunged into stone. It is fossilized, solid, and cold beneath my skin, pulsing with a faint cyan glow. Param 15. I stare at it, disbelieving. As the cat twitches its tail beside me, a wet parchment tear against the hair, rough desk, Param 4, its magenta eyes fixed on mine. It is waiting. The dull, as porcelain hand lies heavy in my other palm, a cold weight that seems to pull at my arm, dragging it down like an anchor. The cat's tail flickers again, this time a deliberate motion, like a flag signaling surrender or victory. I understand its meaning clearly. For pay the price. Asterisk, I press the dull, his hand against my fossilized thumb, feeling the rough edges of porcelain bite into skin that is mine anymore. It feels wrong, like I am carving flesh from bone. But there is no pain, only a dull ache and the sensation of something shifting, changing. The cat watches, its tail twitching like a metronome counting down seconds to some unseen performance. The air hums with radio tuning static. Param 22, each click coot, echoing in my skull louder than any scream could be. I feel it then. The resistance of the air around me giving way, the pressure easing from my chest, as if someone has opened a door somewhere deep inside. The doll has hand crumbles to dust under my touch, leaving behind only a faint glow that disappears into my stone skin like sunlight sinking below horizon. The cat blinks once. A slow closing and opening of its eyes, and I know it understands too. Paid asterisk, I look around the classroom, at the desk sprouting hair. Param 4, the walls lined with fossilized watchers. Param 8, whose cyan glowing eyes seem to follow me no matter where I turn. The air is thick again, but this time it is not wet paper pressing against my lungs. It is anticipation. I walk towards the doors, each footstep echoing like stone grinding underfoot. Sound FX layer. They re-shut tight, sealed by some unseen force or perhaps just by time itself. But there is no handle on these doors, not even a keyhole to hint at escape, just smooth wood and copper scent. Param 11. I reach out anyway, placing my fossilized hand against the door. It feels cold under my touch, but not unyielding. There is give here. An inch maybe, a subtle shift that wasn't there before. I push harder, feeling something move beneath my fingers, stone grinding on stone. Sound FX layer, slow and deliberate like a glacier calving. The doors creak open an inch at first, the sound of pressurized air escaping from behind them, and then wider still as they reveal what lies beyond. A dimly lit hallway stretches out before me, the floors polished concrete instead of worn wood planks, walls bare except for faint scratches, etched into their surfaces like ancient runes. I take a step forward and pause, listening to my own heartbeat echoing down that long corridor. Param 19. Then I hear it. The soft, muffled crying from earlier now louder, clearer. It is not coming from the vents anymore. It is coming from somewhere further ahead in the hall. The cat steps out beside me, its magenta eyes glowing faintly as they reflect off the concrete floor beneath us. Param 15. Its tail flicks once. A wet parchment tear against my ankle, and I feel a shiver run through me. Not fear exactly, more like expectation, anticipation of what is waiting down that hall. I take another step forward, then another. Each footstep echoes louder than the last. The sound of stone grinding underfoot growing into something else entirely. Thump, drip, click, Param 29. The rhythm repeats itself over and over again until it becomes indistinguishable from my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The crying grows louder too. Wet paper sounds unfolding inside wet cardboard. Param 16. Each wail making the hairs on my arms stand tall, each sob echoing deeper than any cry for help ever could. And yet there is no pain here, not even fear anymore. But something else entirely, resolve maybe. Purpose. I reach into my pocket and pull out the glass eye that blinks when I am not looking. Param 13. It feels cold against my palm, heavy like a coin but smaller, more delicate somehow too. Its surface shimmers under the neon static lights casting their cyan glow along the hallway's length. The cat watches me closely as I hold it up to eye level, a tiny perfect sphere of glass reflecting back nothingness, and then flicks its tail again, wet parchment tearing. It understands what this means too. Foot, you own more payment. Asterisk, but before I can throw that eye away, the sound stops abruptly. The crying cuts off mid, wail as if someone has reached in and simply torn out their vocal cords. There is no scream, no gasp of pain even, but just silence suddenly filling up every inch of space around me, and then almost too soft to hear over my own ragged breathing. Just once, a single beat against concrete floors that echoes down the hall like a gunshot going off inside an empty room. Then another, drip, slow and deliberate, each drop falling heavier than the last until they merge together into something else entirely. Click. The doors slam shut behind me. The sound of pressurized air sealing us in Param 17, and I know there is no turning back now. I look at my fossilized hand, then down at the cat beside me. Its magenta eyes glow brighter than ever before, a beacon leading me forward into that long hallway stretching out before us both, endless, unyielding, unforgiving. Thump, drip, click. The rhythm repeats itself again, louder this time. echoing through every inch of space around us until it becomes impossible to tell where one sound ends and another begins. There is only the anticipation now, the knowledge that something waits for me at journey's end, and all I can do is keep moving forward, step by step into whatever comes next. Thump, drip, click, hoo thump, drip, click hoo. The air grows colder around us, darker too, as we venture deeper down this endless hall. The cyan lights flicker intermittently now, their neon glow casting long shadows that seem to reach out and grab at me like skeletal fingers, but still I press on, and then suddenly funpi! Just once, a single beat against concrete floors echoing louder than any gunshot could be, and everything changes again. The hair, patched desk, param 4, scraped against my palms as I kicked it, sending a shower of dust and flakes spiraling into the 40 copper, scented Venci param 11. It wasn't a clean scent, not like polished pennies. It was the smell of something corroded, something old and struggling beneath layers of forced cleanliness. The air sucked at my breath. Param 16, a wet, insistent pull that tasted of damp cardboard and something else, something vaguely metallic like old blood. I stumbled forward, drawn into the duct, the sensation of being swined water intensifying Param 14, though I was undeniably on dry land. The pressure built in my ears, a dull throbbing that resonated with the thumpsid echoing around me. My own heartbeat, amplified and distorted within the narrow space Param 19. The duct walls, swin pulsed, like a throat. Param 16, a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction that made my stomach churn. It wasn't a visual pulse, not exactly. It was a feeling, a vibration that traveled up my legs and settled in my teeth, a constant, unsettling reminder that this wasn't inert, wasn't simply a tunnel. It was alive, or at least mimicking the processes of life. The cyan glow from the fossilized watchers, Param 8, bled into the duct, says darkness, casting elongated, distorted shadows that danced on the walls. I pressed my hand against the rough concrete, the texture abrasive against my skin, which felt increasingly alien. My thumb, the one that had been stone, felt cold and heavy. A foreign object grafted onto my hand, the metallic taste intensified, a bitter tang that coated my tongue. I could almost feel the phantom sensation of grit between my teeth. It was a taste of decay, of something breaking down. The fossilized hand snapped from the wall. Param 17, unexpectedly, a sudden jarring movement that sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. It clamped onto my ankle, Param 17, with 20 stone, crushing weight. The grip was relentless, unyielding, the coldness seeping into my bones. I tried to pull away, but the hand held firm, a silent, implacable force. The cat, its magenta eyes glowing faintly in the gloom, watched with an unnerving stillness. It didn't offer assistance. Didn't even acknowledge my struggle, just watched. Hoofating. A primal urge seized me, a desperate need to sever the connection, to break free. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface of the doll, a porcelain arm Param 7. I ripped it free, the porcelain cracking slightly under the pressure. The taste in my mouth worsened, a rush of copper and something acrid, something almost sweet. I chew the doll, saw, tooth arm, Param 7, the porcelain grinding between my teeth. Param 22. It wasn't a conscious decision, more a reflexive act of desperation. Bone splintersy beneath my teeth. Param 7, sharp and brittle, a grotesque parody of a meal. The taste was overwhelming, nauseating, but I continued to chew, driven by a compulsion I could understand. The grip on my ankle loosened slightly. I pulled, testing the release, and the fossilized hand relinquished its hold, crumbling into dust that swirled around my feet like a miniature storm. The metallic taste began to recede, leaving behind a lingering bitterness. I stumbled forward, deeper into the duct, the underwater sensation, intensifying once more, Param 14. The walls pressed in on me, the air thick and heavy, making each breath a conscious effort. The thumpset continued, now accompanied by a new sound, a soft, muffled weeping emanating from somewhere ahead. The weeping was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A constant, unsettling presence that burrowed into my mind. It wasn't the sound of grief, not exactly. It was more like the sound of something broken, something irrevocably damaged. I pushed onward, driven by a morbid curiosity, a desperate need to understand the source of the sorrow. The cat followed silently, its magenta eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. I could feel its gaze on me, A silent judgment, a constant reminder that I was being watched, that I was not alone. The neon static lights. Param 22 flickered violently, casting strobe like shadows that distorted the already unsettling environment. Each flash felt like a pulse, a heartbeat echoing through the confined space. The weeping grew louder, clearer, morphing from a muffled murmur into a series of choked sobs. It was a child, his voice fragile and broken, laced with a despair that seemed to permeate the very air around me. The underwater sensation became almost unbearable, a crushing weight that pressed down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I felt a rising panic, a desperate urge to turn back, to escape this oppressive environment. But something held me back, a sense of obligation, a feeling that I was somehow responsible for the suffering I was witnessing. I reached out, my hand brushing against something cold and smooth, a metal grate. I pushed against it, and it swung open with a groan, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber. Inside, a child sat huddled in a corner, their face obscured by shadows. The weeping continued, a constant heartbreaking lament that filled the small space. The cat slipped through the grate beside me, its magenta eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. It paused, its tail twitching slowly, before stepping into the chamber, disappearing into the shadows. I followed, bracing myself for what I was about to see. I jammed the glass eye into the watcher's socket with more force than necessary. It blinked, a wet bone clicking that echoed through the duct like thunder, and twitched spasmodically, its arm jerking upwards in an unnatural angle before freezing once again. I pulled it out quickly, the sensation of ozone filling my mouth, a harsh taste that clung to my tongue and made me gag reflexively. The walls around me shuddered, hair sprouting from their surfaces like living fur, growing at an alarming rate until they resembled the pelt of some grotesque beast. Panic surged through me, cold sweat beading on my forehead as I turned to run, the cat reappearing suddenly beside me, its gold and bone teeth glinting in the neon static lights. It pawed at a doll's head lying on the duct floor, its magenta eyes never leaving mine. There was no communication between us. No spoken words or silent nods, just an understanding as old as time itself. The price wasn't money, it was something else entirely. I snatched up the doll's head and threw it down the duct ahead of me, watching as it bounced along the concrete before disappearing into darkness. The cat bounded after it, its lithe form swallowed by shadows almost immediately. I followed suit, my heart pounding in time with the thoof and teeth going through the walls. The air grew heavier, thicker, each breath a conscious effort against the crushing sensation that seemed to permeate every inch of this godforsaken place. The walls pulsed like throats again, their rhythm now erratic and unsettling, matching my own racing heartbeat perfectly. They were alive in more ways than one. I stumbled forward, drawn towards something unseen, but undeniably present. My hands, slick with sweat, brushed against the rough concrete of each turn, guiding me through this labyrinthine nightmare. The sound of wet parchment tearing filled my ears, accompanied by a low hum that seemed to emanate from every surface around me. The cat reappeared suddenly ahead, its magenta eyes glowing softly in the gloom like twin lanterns leading me on. It was waiting for something. Me, perhaps. Or maybe it was awaiting some unseen signal before continuing deeper into this abyss. My reflection stared back at me from a broken mirror hanging crookedly from the wall, distorted by cracks and shattered glass. I paused, reaching out tentatively to touch its surface, and screamed. Its mouth moved silently, forming words that weren't mine. "It is not what it seems," it whispered against the glass, lips curling into a smile that was far too wide for any human face. My heart hammered in my chest like a trapped animal seeking escape as I tore myself away from its gaze and stumbled onwards. The cat turned at last, disappearing around another corner with barely a glance back, as if daring me to follow, or perhaps hoping I wouldn't. There was no choice but to press on into the darkness that seemed intent on consuming everything in its path, my sanity included. I rounded the bend and found myself face to face with a metal grate, the only exit from this godforsaken place. And there, sitting squarely in front of it like some sort of grotesque guardian, was the cat. Its magenta eyes bore into me, unblinking and unwavering as if challenging my very existence. I approached cautiously, each step measured against the crushing weight that seemed intent on flattening me beneath its heel. The air grew colder still, heavy with anticipation, or perhaps it was simply the cold sweat dripping down my spine. The cat didn't move, not even a flicker of recognition at my approach, but I could feel something changing nonetheless. It was as though all the air had been sucked from the room, leaving behind an oppressive silence that seemed to crush me under its heel. I reached out tentatively towards it, and everything went black. The desk was slick with something that wasn't quite oil, wasn't quite sweat. It clung to my fingers like a second skin, warm and viscous, pulling at the glass eye still clutched in my palm. My breath came in shallow, uneven bursts, each exhalation a cloud of condensation in the air that refused to disperse. The classroom stretched before me, desks fused together in places, their wooden surfaces erupting with tendrils of hair, fine and brittle as spider silk, curling over the edges like something half alive. I didn't remember crossing the threshold. Didn't remember the weight of the eye in my pocket, the way it pulsed faintly, a slow heartbeat of fractured light. I crouched, my knees pressing into the grain of the floorboards, which groaned beneath me like a living thing. The radio sat on the desk, its chassis rusted at the seams, its dial twisted into a jagged, unnatural shape. I hadn't seen one of these in years, not since the war, not since the static started whispering. My fingers hovered over it, the glass eye still glued to my palm, its socket slick with something dark and sticky. I pressed it against the radio's speaker, the way I had in the old days when the voices still made sense. The hiss that answered me wasn't static, it was breathing. A wet, ragged inhalation, then a voice. No, a voice of fuss scrape, like nails dragging across a chalkboard, but shaped into words. Ethan. Ethan. The sound of it slithered into my skull, wrapping around my thoughts like barbed wire. I recoiled, but the desk held me, the hair on its surface twitching as if sensing my movement. The radio screen flickered, a sickly cyan glow bleeding through the cracks in its glass, and the words Therige. They're correcting you pulsed in jagged letters, not printed, not written, but moving, like something alive crawling across the surface. My stomach twisted. The taste of copper flooded my mouth, thick and metallic, and I spat, but nothing came. The air thickened around me, pressing in like the weight of a drowning man's lungs. The sobbing started then, not from the radio, from the walls. A low, keening wail, muffled but relentless, seeping through the vents like water through a crack in a dam. It wasn't human. It was the sound of something trying to scream but being strangled before it could. I pressed my palms against the desk, my fingers sinking into the wood, and the radio's body trembled beneath my touch. The glass eye in my hand twitched. I didn't look down. I couldn't. The desks shifted, not the hair. The kutud. The grain split open, peeling back like skin, revealing something wet and glistening beneath. The watchers were turning, not all at once, never all at once, but in waves, their stone limbs cracking, their faces twisting as if something inside them was trying to get out. The air reeked of wet cement, of rust, of the sharp, acrid tang of ozone after a storm. My fingers stiffened. The glass eye in my hand burned. They're correcting you. The word slithered again, this time from the walls, from the desks, from the fun vents. The sobbing grew louder, closer, and I realized it wasn't coming from the ducts. It was coming from 20 my own voice distorted, echoing back at me from the corners of the room, from the cracks in the floor, from the jagged edges of the radio screen. I tore my hand away from the desk, but the eye wouldn't let go. It clung to my palm, its socket weeping a thick, syrupy fluid that hissed when it hit the wood. The watchers were moving now, not walking, unfolding, their limbs bending at impossible angles, their mouths gaping wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth that hadn't been there before. I dropped the radio. It shattered. The sound wasn't glass breaking. It was puffin bones. The impact sent a vibration through the floor, and the desks groaned in response, their hair writhing like snakes. The air turned to wet cement. My lungs seized. I clawed at my throat, but there was nothing to grab, nothing to pull apart. The watchers were closer now, their stone faces tilted toward me, their mouths open wide, their breath a fog of fine, powdery dust that settled on my skin like ash. I tasted copper again, thick and choking, and my vision blurred. The radio screen flickered one last time. The words, "Tum correcting you," bleeding into the static before it went dark. The last thing I saw was the glass eye rolling across the floor, its socket blinking in the dim light, a slow, deliberate wink before it stopped. The watcher's jaws opened in unison, and the air turned to stone. The splintering felt wrong. Not the clean break of dry wood, but a yielding. A kivadeska leg wasn't entirely solid. It tasted of dust and something older, something that clung to the back of my throat like a film. I sawed with the doll's arm, the miniature teeth biting into the wood, each stroke sending vibrations up my own hardening limb. The porcelain was cold, alien, spreading from my wrist, encasing my hand in a brittle shell. It wasn't painful. Not yet, but the restriction, the inability to flex, to feel the wood grain under my fingers. Sun-bleached bone. That's what the splinters resembled, pale and porous, flaking away under the pressure. Each fragment felt impossibly light, as if they wouldn't register on a scale. I stuffed the doll's arm into my mouth, a desperate animalistic act. The porcelain scraped against my gums, a jagged intrusion. The taste wasn't blood, not initially. It was the same copper tang that had been coating everything, but layered with something else chalk, and the faint, sickly sweetness of decay. I chewed. Not with teeth, not anymore. The porcelain grated against itself, the miniature teeth shattering into a fine, gritty powder. Fossilized teeth. They dissolved on my tongue, leaving a residue that felt like sand. The sensation spread, a tightening in my jaw, a hardening of my palate. My hands were almost entirely porcelain now, the skin stretched taut, cracking with the slightest movement. I tried to open the classroom door, to force the handle down, but my fingers wouldn't bend. They locked, rigid and unyielding. The porcelain protested with a high-pitched whine, like glass singing under stress. The cat sat on my hand, its weight surprisingly substantial, pressing down on the fragile surface. It didn't purr, didn't meow. It simply twatty-watched, its mismatched eyes reflecting the sickly cyan glow emanating from the broken radio. A single drop of blood, thick and black, welled up on the porcelain, tracing a path down my wrist. The cat lowered its head, its rough tongue lapping at the droplet, tasting it with deliberate slowness. It wasn't hunting, it was assessing. This was the correction, not a punishment, not a reprimand, a recalibration, a reshaping. The air grew heavy, viscous, like trying to breathe underwater. The sensation of being submerged wasn't in my lungs, but in my bones, the weight pressed down, flattening me, compressing my chest. The desks continued to shift, the hair on their surfaces writhing, but I barely registered it. My focus narrowed, concentrating on the feel of the porcelain spreading, consuming my vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a hazy, static-filled grey. The sobbing from the vents had stopped, replaced by a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was a feeling. A pressure against my skull, a tightening in my chest. The classroom seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the desks pressing closer. I could smell the wet cement again, stronger now, mingled with the scent of old paper and something metallic. Something burnt. The cat lifted its head, its golden and bone teeth gleaming in the dim light. It blinked, slowly, deliberately. A flicker of recognition or perhaps satisfaction. The porcelain reached my elbow, the cracking intensifying. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My throat was sealed, encased in the cold, unyielding material. The doll in my pocket breathed. Not a gasp, not a sigh, a full, ragged inhalation expanding against my side. It wasn't my breath. It was something 20 inside. The doll, something taking root, claiming space. The porcelain reached my shoulder, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it wouldn't stop there. The air thickened, solidifying around me, turning to stone. My last sensation was the cat's weight shifting, settling more firmly on my hand, its claws digging into the porcelain, anchoring it to the floor. I stared into a puddle. The water was stagnant, slick with a film I couldn't identify, and the surface barely rippled. It reflected a doll's face, not mine. The porcelain was chipped, the painted eyes wide and vacant, the mouth frozen in a silent, unsettling smile. It wasn't a perfect reflection either. The edges blurred, the details distorted, as if the puddle itself were a flawed lens, warping the image into something wrong. Silence pressed against me, a physical weight, thick and heavy like wet cotton. It wasn't the absence of sound, but a suffocating stillness, a void where noise should have been. It thickened my throat, making it difficult to swallow, a tightening coil of pressure behind my sternum. I slammed my palm against the wall. The sound was dull, muffled, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. It felt wrong too, not the solid thud of plaster and brick, but a yielding give, a dampness that seeped through my skin. I drew my hand back, and it fossilized beneath my touch. The skin tightened, the pores shrinking, the color draining away, leaving behind a pale, brittle surface. The sensation wasn't painful, not yet, but unsettlingly cold, a creeping numbness that spread up my arm. I looked down, and the wall itself was changing, the smooth surface cracking, the texture shifting into something rough and granular like petrified wood. Stone skin watchers stared. They were everywhere, embedded in the walls, the ceiling, the floor. They weren't statues, not exactly. They were people frozen in moments of silent observation, their faces contorted in expressions of detached amusement or profound sadness. Their eyes were cyan, a sickly, unnatural glow that pulsed with a faint, internal light. They didn't blink, didn't breathe. They simply watched, their gaze unwavering, their presence radiating a palpable sense of judgment. I tried to look away, but my eyes felt heavy, glued to their unsettling stares. The cat sat on my fossilized hand. Its weight was surprisingly substantial, anchoring me to the spot. The gold and bone teeth gleamed in the dim light, a grotesque parody of a smile. It didn't purr, didn't meow, it simply forced, its mismatched eyes reflecting the cyan glow of the stone-skin watchers. The air grew thick, viscous, making it difficult to breathe. It felt like trying to draw air through molasses, a constant, suffocating pressure in my lungs. I tasted copper again, the metallic tang coating my tongue, mingling with the dust and the faint, sickly sweetness of decay. A single drop of black blood welled up on the porcelain of my wrist, tracing a path down my arm. It wasn't the bright, vibrant red of life, but a thick, viscous black, like ink bleeding into parchment. The cat lowered its head, its rough tongue lapping at the droplet, tasting it with deliberate slowness. It wasn't hunting, it was assessing. The act was methodical, almost clinical, as if it were analyzing a sample in a laboratory. A low hum resonated through the floor, a vibration that traveled up my legs, rattling my teeth. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was a feeling, a pressure against my skull, a tightening in my chest. My reflection in the puddle blinked. It wasn't my blink. It was slower, more deliberate, almost mocking. The doll's face in the reflection widened its smile, a subtle shift that sent a jolt of primal fear through me. I tried to scream, but my throat was constricted, the porcelain spreading, sealing my vocal cords. The air grew colder, the cyan glow intensifying, illuminating the stone-skin watchers, their faces frozen in expressions of silent, knowing amusement. The smell of wet cement intensified, overpowering the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of blood. The puddle swallowed my reflection, and the doll's face stared back. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a window, a portal to something else. The surface of the puddle rippled, distorting the image, pulling it inwards, as if it were being sucked into a void. I felt a strange lightness, a detachment from my body, as if I were floating above the scene, watching it unfold from a distance. The classroom seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the desks pressing closer, their hairy surfaces writhing in a silent, unsettling dance. The humming intensified, vibrating through my bones, resonating with the porcelain, spreading through my limbs. I tried to fight it, to resist the transformation, but it was futile. The porcelain was relentless, consuming everything in its path, my skin tightened, cracking with the slightest movement. My fingers locked, rigid and unyielding. My vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a hazy, static-filled grey. The sensation of being underwater intensified, the pressure crushing my chest, flattening me against the floor. The stone-skin watchers leaned closer, their cyan eyes burning into my soul. The cat remained perched on my hand, its golden and bone teeth gleaming in the dim light, its mismatched eyes fixed on me, unwavering. It was waiting. The classroom swam into focus. A nauseating lurch in my gut, the only indication of transition. Hair-patched desks, identical to the last, stretched before me. A silent, hairy forest. The air hung thick and heavy, tasting of dust and something else. Something metallic, like old pennies left to corrode. My skin prickled, a cold sweat blossoming across my chest. It is not what it seems, Ba. The mantra echoed in my skull. A desperate attempt to anchor myself to something resembling reason. My hand, the one the cat occupied, felt wrong, stiff, like a poorly articulated marionette. I glanced down. The fluorescent lights, or whatever passed for lights here, casting a sickly pallor across the scene. The glass eye, embedded in my neck, pulsed with a faint, internal light. It blinked. Not my blink. A slow, deliberate movement like a clockwork mechanism struggling to function. I hated it. Hated the way it felt grafted to my flesh, the way it seemed to observe the world with a detached, alien intelligence. A surge of defiance, a desperate clawing for control, propelled me forward. I lunged, my arms stiff and resistant, and jammed the glass eye into the nearest watcher's socket. The stone-skin face, frozen in an expression of detached amusement, didn't flinch. It didn't react. Then, a shudder ran through the figure, a subtle tremor that rippled across its petrified features. Its mouth, a thin, cruel line, began to open. The sound that emerged wasn't human. It was a distorted echo, a garbled whisper filtered through layers of static. "You are the toy now." The words resonated in the room, bouncing off the hairy desks, amplifying the sense of claustrophobia. My fingers, still locked in the cat's grip, began to crack. A network of fine lines spiderwebbed across my skin, deepening into fissures that felt like the splitting of ancient rock. The porcelain was spreading, inexorable and cold. I could feel it creeping up my arms, stiffening my joints, turning my flesh into something brittle and unyielding. It wasn't painful, not precisely. It was a faux transformation. A violation of my very being. The cat shifted, its golden and bone teeth gleaming in the dim light. It didn't purr, didn't meow. It simply watched, its mismatched eyes reflecting the cyan glow of the watchers. The air grew thicker, the metallic taste in my mouth intensifying, mingling with the dust and the faint, sickly sweetness of decay. I tasted something else, too. A bitter, acrid tang that burned the back of my throat. It felt like I was chewing on powdered bone. The distorted voice echoed again, emanating from the watcher whose eye I'd stolen. It was a chorus now, a cacophony of voices blending into a single unsettling drone. "You are the toy now! You are the toy now!" The humming intensified, vibrating through the floor, up my legs, rattling my teeth. It wasn't a sound I heard, but a pressure against my skull, a tightening in my chest. A low thrumming resonated within my bones, a sympathetic vibration that threatened to shatter me from the inside out. I struggled against the transformation, a frantic, desperate effort to retain some semblance of control. But it was futile. The porcelain was relentless, consuming everything in its path. My vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a hazy, grey static. The classroom seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the hairy desks pressing closer, their surfaces writhing in a silent, unsettling dance. I could feel the stone-skin watchers leaning closer, their cyan eyes burning into my soul. They weren't judging me anymore, they were welcoming me! The cat released my hand, its grip surprisingly strong, its touch leaving behind a chilling numbness. It hopped down from the desk and padded towards the far wall, its tail twitching rhythmically. The cat's teeth smoothed to river stone, a subtle shift that sent a fresh wave of panic through me. It wasn't a predatory smile anymore. It was a gesture, an invitation, a gatekeeper offering passage. I ran, not with legs that obeyed, but with the jerky, forced motion of a marionette whose strings were pulled by an unsteady hand. The desks, those hairy islands in a sea of sickly cyan, weren't stationary. They shifted, subtly, but undeniably, angling themselves to obstruct my path, to funnel me deeper into this impossible classroom. Each step sent a jolt of pressure through my chest, a tightening band that threatened to crush the air from my lungs. I grabbed a doll's head from a nearby desk, porcelain cold and slick against my skin, and slammed it against the wall. The impact wasn't the shattering of ceramic, but the splintering of something older. A fossilized eye embedded within the plaster, cracked, releasing a puff of grey dust that tasted like ash and regret. The pressure intensified. It wasn't merely physical, it was a weight settling on my ribs, compressing my sternum, stealing my breath. Each inhale became a ragged gasp, each exhale a wheezing struggle. I spat, and the taste of copper flooded my mouth, thick and metallic, coating my tongue with a bitter tang. It wasn't blood. Not exactly. It was something manufactured. A byproduct of the transformation, a chemical residue of the porcelain spreading through my veins. Then, the cat. It stepped into a shaft of the flickering, cyan light no longer a shadow, but a solid, unsettling presence. Its gait was deliberate, precise. Each poreful a muffled thud against the worn linoleum. It wasn't watching Fudi Maifi to Infai anymore. It was watching Fudit Pastu me, towards the far wall, towards something I couldn't see. Its teeth, the polished gold and jagged bone, had smoothed. Not worn down, not broken, but Tifi corrected. They were a single, seamless curve of riverstone, cool and grey. It wasn't a predatory grin now, or even a gesture of amusement. It was an invitation, a silent offering. A gatekeeper presenting the price of passage. I understood, with a sickening clarity, that the cat wasn't merely observing the unfolding horror. It was facilitating. It was the mechanism. the key to unlocking the next stage of this nightmare, and the price wasn't something I possessed, something I could bargain with. My agency, my form, my very self. The stone skin watchers, those petrified figures lining the walls, leaned forward, their cyan eyes burning into my soul. They weren't judging me, weren't mocking me. They were welcoming me, accepting me into their silent, static world. A chorus of whispers, distorted and fragmented, echoed in the room. The correction is complete. The correction is complete. My ribs sun-upped, not with a sharp, agonizing break, but with a dull, grinding pressure like branches breaking under immense weight. And then I felt it. The shifting of bone, the reshaping of muscle, the hardening of flesh. It wasn't pain, not in the conventional sense. It was a restructuring, a remolding. I felt the doll's joints forming sooted me, locking my limbs into preordained positions, restricting my movement, turning me into a vessel, a container. My fingers, once capable of delicate manipulation, were becoming fixed, inflexible, incapable of grasping, of feeling. The porcelain spread faster now, consuming my arm, my shoulder, creeping up my neck. It wasn't merely coating my skin. It was Sunti becoming Wundi my skin, replacing the warmth and elasticity of flesh with the cold, brittle rigidity of ceramic. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, choked off by the tightening pressure in my chest. My vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a hazy grey static. The classroom seemed to shrink. The walls closing in, the hairy desks pressing closer, their surfaces writhing in a silent, unsettling dance. The air tasted like dust and decay, like the ghosts of forgotten memories. The cat tilted its head, its stone teeth gleaming in the dim light. It took a single step forward, then another, until it was standing directly in front of the far wall. It didn't look back. It didn't need to. I was already where it wanted me to be. The pressure reached its peak, and I knew with a chilling certainty that there was no escape. There was only the correction. There was only the transformation. There was only the becoming. I dropped to my knees on the linoleum, the impact sending a fresh wave of pressure through my fossilizing fingers. They're not just stiffening. They're tree-dissolving into the same chalky, porous substance as the walls. Each joint locks with a dry, grinding sound like eraser dust underfoot. The cyan light above bleeds into the magenta static flickering across the ceiling, making the air feel thick, viscous, like breathing underwater while standing dry. I can't feel my legs anymore, only the cold seep of porcelain rising up my arms, replacing skin with brittle, unyielding weight. The last unbroken doll. Its porcelain face smooth, eyes wide with silent terror, sits heavy in my palm. I force my stiffened fingers to lift it, the doll's neck cold against my palm. It's the only thing left that hasn't crumbled. The cat watches, stone teeth gleaming like river rocks under the flickering light. Its head tilts, a silent command. I offer the doll forward, my shoulder blades grinding as I lean. This is the price. This is the gate. The cat doesn't move. It just twin-nipsy the doll's neck. Not a bite, but a precise, silent severing. The porcelain splits with a sound like wet parchment tearing. A tiny fracture spiderwebbing out from the neck. The doll's head lolls sideways, eyes staring blankly. Then the cat steps aside. The far wall shrivels, not like a reflection, but like a curtain of cyan light parting. Behind it, not the classroom, but a radio studio. Desks covered in old microphones, a turntable with a spinning record, the warm glow of a single amber bulb. The air there smells of ozone and old paper, a sharp contrast to the classroom's dust and decay. The exit isn't a door, it's a tear, in reality, humming faintly. The cat doesn't look back. It simply melts into the wall, leaving only the void where the exit now pulses. I drag myself forward, every movement a grinding of bone against stone. My body is stitching itself shut, limbs locking into place, joints hardening into porcelain. The sensation isn't pain. It's the slow, inevitable tightening of a noose made of silk. The silk unravels. Inside, me threads of cold, brittle fiber weaving through my veins, replacing muscle with a fabric that feels like dried blood and broken glass. I step through the tear. The studio air is cool, smelling of static and vinyl. My feet make no sound on the worn carpet. I'm standing in front of a microphone, the cord snaking across the floor. The radio crackles to life, not with music, but with my own voice, distorted and layered with the static of a dead channel. Check the classroom. The desks are breathing. The words are mine, yet they sound like they're coming from a different throat, a different time. The radio's hiss swells, filling the studio, vibrating in my chest cavity where the porcelain now resides. My vision blurs at the edges, the cyan and magenta lights bleeding into a single suffocating haze. The underwater feeling intensifies. My lungs are full of cold, thick water, but I can't breathe. I can't scream. The stitch silk is pulling me tighter, binding my ribs, locking my jaw shut. I feel my own voice on the radio, a whisper of static, a plea, a command. Tef, check the classroom, the desks are breathing. The words echo, but they're not mine anymore. They're the studio's voice, the radio's voice, the voice of the correction. My last breath catches in my throat. Not a gasp, not a sigh, but a single, silent expulsion of air. The radio static swells, a high, pure tone that cuts through the studio's silence like a knife. The static isn't noise. It's the sound of my own form dissolving. The sound of the stitch silk unraveling into pure, unbroken static. The last thing I feel is the cold weight of the porcelain spreading up my neck, sealing my mouth shut, and the final chilling clarity the desks in the classroom aren't breathing. They're shriek-waiting. The radio crackles one last time, my voice now just a hiss, a whisper of the words I can no longer speak. My last breath is static.